in Europe, everything stopped. You know, the British, Tony Blair got up there and made his case to the House of Commons, and everything stopped. We didn't go to class. You could watch it in bars. In Europe, they really gave a damn. And this part of the debate gave me major flashbacks to that day, being down in the basement of my school with my teachers and my fellow classmates and watching that debate for hours and hours and hours while they say, let the UN finish doing their job. And listen to this from today. It sounds exactly the same.
First, and this is where the Prime Minister and I now agree, we must let the UN weapons inspectors do their work and let them report to the Security Council. Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, said yesterday about the weapons inspectors, and I quote, let them conclude their work for 4 days, and then we will have to analyse scientifically with experts, and then we will have to report to the Security Council for action. So the weapons inspectors are in the midst of their work and will be reporting in the coming days. That is why today could not have been the day when the House was asked to decide on military action. For this House, it is surely a basic point. Evidence should precede decision, not decision precede evidence.
Yeah. So, God, British Parliament is so much cooler than Congress, isn't it? But anyway, so what the British want to do is they want to have the UN have the world, because, okay, the UN started after our world wars, and it was a way for the major powers of the world to come together and decide when we're going to act as a world community against someone who's gone nutty. There's a problem, though, with this specific instance when it comes to Syria, which is that Russia has a veto on the UN, and they're down with Syria. So being an ally, they're not going to approve, by all accounts, they're not going to approve this attack on Syria. So this is the British plan, and presumably our plan too, on how they're going to justify and make it legal, even if Russia gives a veto to the resolution that would authorize an attack.
Look, the very best route to follow is to have a Chapter 7 resolution, take it to the UN Security Council, have it passed, and then think about taking action. That is the path we followed with Libya. Now, this is I want to make this point, because this is very important. It cannot be the case that that is the only way to have a legal basis for action, and we should consider for a moment what the consequences would be if that were the case. You could have a situation in a country where its government was literally annihilating half the people in that country, but because of one veto on the Security Council, you would be hampered from taking any action. Now, I can't think of any member in any party of this House who would want to sign up to that, and that's why it's important we do have the doctrine of humanitarian intervention, which is set out in the Attorney General's excellent legal advice.
Big problem here. By even being a part of the UN, we did sign up for that. We did say that Russia gets a vote here. But notice that they said that they're going to make this a humanitarian mission, and therefore they won't really need the UN. That's how they're going to try and get around international law. So the debate kind of went along those lines for hours. It was like 2 or 3 hours. But there was a fascinating exchange that happened a couple hours into this debate, where they were talking about what the repercussions could be of this attack. Now, it's funny because when you hear the Obama administration talk, they've been very clear in saying that they're not trying to have regime change like they did in Iraq. When we went into Iraq, we were trying to get rid of Saddam, okay? And Obama has said in August of 2011 that Assad has got to go, but he said that is not going to be the goal here. The goal is to have targeted strikes that are going to take out certain things and basically teach him a lesson for using chemical weapons. But there might be repercussions to that. So I'm going to play you a long clip here. This is the most fascinating 5 minutes of this debate, but is also going to be something that I'm going to remember 20 years from now, in regards to our American media in the run-up to yet another war, because of what happened as I was listening to this debate. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the insanity.
My 2 questions are, is it proven that Assad did it beyond reasonable doubt? And secondly, even if he or his regime did it, is a military strike sensible? Now, first of all, on the question of whether or not he did it, the UN inspectors aren't going to tell us anything about that. As I understand it, all they're going to do is going to tell us whether or not a sarin gas attack took place. So we can't look to them for pointing the finger as to who did it. The JIC have been cited, and we can all read the summary, and the summary is not conclusive. The summary, in fact, says that the JIC are baffled as to find a motive for Assad having done this, and well they might be, because if he did do it, and maybe he did, if he did do it, it was the height of irrationality for him to do the one thing that might get the West intervening against him.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Yes, of course, I'll give way.
I think there is a clear motive for him to have done this. He's been using chemical weapons on a number of occasions, 5 previous occasions, testing the West to see if they were going to respond. He's lost control of Aleppo airport. Homs is still under rebel control. The rebels are fighting in the suburbs of Damascus. He's getting desperate. That's why he used it. There is no question that there's any circumstantial evidence that points to anyone else.
I greatly respect my honourable friend's opinions on this and all other related matters, but nevertheless that would make more sense if he actually was willing to acknowledge that he'd been testing the water rather than vehemently denying that he did it. I think it's just as likely, I'm not going to give way when I'm still answering a previous question, it's just as likely that if the regime were responsible in some way, it might have been done by some part of the regime unauthorised by another part of the regime. And indeed, this leads me to the question of contradictory evidence, because according to the leaked reports, on the one hand we're getting stories that this was ordered by Assad's brother in a retaliation for an attempt on the life of the leadership, an assassination attempt that failed. On the other hand, we're saying that there's intercept evidence that in fact it may have been the result of somebody unauthorised doing this, because there was a telephone conversation where somebody was saying, "Why on earth did you do this?" and there was a sort of panicked reaction to unauthorised release of poison gas. The point about all this is that it is very far from certain that the evidence stacks up, and indeed we have got the Intelligence and Security Committee, and I can see no reason whatsoever that the ISC, which is cleared for classification well up to the sort of material that the JIC has been looking at and that the Prime Minister has seen, and I don't see why those of us who have been cleared for that sort of access should not have that sort of access. But I now move on to the second question, and the second question is this. Let's suppose that Assad did it. Is it then sensible to reply with military action? We've heard the arguments about red lines, and we've heard the arguments about the importance and the sacrosanct taboo that we must stand up for. But if it is the case that my honourable friend is correct and that the Assad government actually did do this irrational thing, then that shows that the Assad government is behaving very irrationally indeed. And one of the things that really does bother me greatly is that it is now being suggested, and I say this as someone generally supportive of Israel, that Israeli intelligence may be the source of the evidence that the Assad government did it. If Assad is behaving irrationally, if Assad is so desperate, what is to prevent Assad, if he is attacked militarily by us on the perceived basis of intelligence supplied by Israel, from retaliating with a chemical attack against Israel? What then will Israel do? Israel will retaliate in turn. What then will America do? What then will Iran do? What then will Russia do? I started off, Mr. Speaker, by making a reference to the First World War. And next year we are going to be commemorating the centenary of the events of August 1914. And those events have a worrying parallel, because you had a series of actions and reactions which drew in an escalating fashion, one country after another. Nobody thought that the assassination of an obscure archduke would lead to a world conflagration. This, as Admiral Lord West has said, is a powder keg, and we should not be lobbing weapons into the heart of such combustible material.
So we're going to break away from this British House of Commons debate on Syria at this point. We expect this debate to continue for several hours with possible votes later today. Taking a look at Twitter, Democratic Congressman Alan Grayson.
Yes, that was C-SPAN 2, cutting away from their coverage at the peak of the debate, at the point where the British House of Commons was finally cutting through the bullshit and actually having a debate about the stuff that matters, the implications of an attack might have on the entire world. They cut away to tell us about congressional tweets. And then after they spent about 10 minutes telling us about the tweets, what did they deem to be more important than the live footage from the British House of Commons debating a matter of war? An interview with the Cheney family as they are promoting their book.